Have you ever noticed something strange? The moment you stop caring about someone, suddenly their attitude changes. They begin to notice you. They start reaching out. They act different, almost like something inside their mind woke up. But why does this happen? Why does someone ignore you when you care deeply, yet start paying attention when you step back? If you stay with this until the end, you will understand a powerful truth about human psychology that most people never learn. And once you understand it, you will never chase someone's attention the same way again. Think about a moment in your life when you cared too much. You tried to be present. You replied quickly. You gave attention. You showed interest. You made time for them. You thought that if you cared more, if you showed more effort, they would value you more. That is what most people believe, that love grows through constant giving. But something unexpected happens. Instead of moving closer, they begin to pull away. They respond slower. They become distant. Their effort becomes smaller. And the more you try to fix it, the worse it feels. You send another message. You try to start another conversation. You try to show them you care. But deep inside, you feel something uncomfortable. A quiet fear begins to grow. A fear that maybe they are not valuing you the way you value them. Many people experience this moment. And when it happens, they think the solution is to try harder, to care more, to prove their worth. But this is where most people misunderstand human psychology, because attention works in a very unusual way. When something becomes constantly available, the mind slowly stops noticing its value. Think about it. The human brain is designed to notice change, not comfort. When something is always there, always predictable, always guaranteed, the brain stops feeling urgency. Your attention becomes expected. Your kindness becomes normal. Your effort becomes invisible. This does not mean the other person is evil. It does not mean they plan to ignore you. Often it happens without them even realizing it. The human mind simply adapts to what feels constant, and slowly the balance of the relationship begins to shift. One person gives more. The other person invests less. One person thinks more. The other person worries less. But then something unexpected happens. One day, you stop. You stop sending the long messages. You stop trying to hold every conversation together. You stop chasing the connection, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because something inside you becomes tired. You begin to focus on yourself again. You give your time to your own life, your own peace, your own growth. And suddenly, something changes. The person who seemed distant begins to notice. They start wondering why you are quieter. They notice the silence where your attention used to be. And in that moment, something powerful happens inside the human mind. Curiosity wakes up. The brain starts asking questions. Why is she different now? Did something change? Did I lose her attention? For the first time, the certainty disappears. And when certainty disappears, attention returns. Because the human brain is deeply sensitive to the possibility of loss. When something feels guaranteed, the mind relaxes. But when that guarantee disappears, the mind suddenly becomes alert. It begins to search, it begins to notice, it begins to care. This is why people often feel confused when someone's behavior suddenly changes after they step back. They think it is a coincidence. They think it is luck, but it is not. It is psychology. The moment your attention becomes less predictable, your value becomes more visible. The moment your energy shifts away from chasing, the dynamic changes. And this is not about playing games. It is not about manipulating people. It is about understanding something deeper about human nature. People naturally move toward what feels valuable, and value is often recognized through contrast. When someone always has your attention, they cannot feel the difference between having it and losing it. But the moment that attention disappears, the contrast becomes clear. Suddenly, they remember the warmth of your presence. They remember the conversations. They remember the effort you gave, not because you forced them to notice, but because the absence revealed the value. This is one of the most powerful lessons in emotional psychology. And yet, many people learn it too late. They spend months, sometimes years, exhausting themselves trying to prove their importance to someone who has already become comfortable with receiving their attention. But the truth is simple. Value is not created by chasing. Value is created by balance. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and allow someone to feel what life is like without the energy you once gave so freely. Because when you stop caring about forcing someone to notice you, when attention suddenly disappears, the mind does something very interesting. It begins to search for meaning. Humans are wired to understand changes in behavior. When someone who once gave energy suddenly becomes quiet, the brain cannot ignore it. Silence creates questions, and questions create focus. This is where a powerful psychological process begins to unfold. The mind starts replaying memories. It goes back through conversations. It remembers the kindness that once felt normal. It begins to notice the emotional space that now feels empty. What once felt ordinary now feels rare. This shift happens because the brain is deeply sensitive to contrast. When something is constantly present, the mind adapts. But when that presence fades, the difference becomes visible. It is similar to walking into a quiet room after leaving a noisy street. The silence suddenly feels powerful. The absence becomes noticeable. The same pattern happens with emotional attention. When someone stops offering endless effort, the other person begins to recognize the emotional gap that has appeared, and this gap activates a natural psychological response known as uncertainty. Uncertainty is one of the strongest triggers in human behavior. When the mind feels uncertain, it becomes alert. It starts observing more carefully. It looks for signals. It begins to care about outcomes it once ignored. This is why someone who once seemed relaxed suddenly begins paying attention again. Their mind is trying to understand what changed. The comfort they once felt is gone, and the brain dislikes losing emotional security. For a long time, they knew your attention would always be there. They believed your presence was guaranteed. That belief allowed them to relax. They did not feel pressure to protect the connection, but the moment your energy shifts away, something inside their mind wakes up. They begin noticing things they once overlooked. Your absence during the day, the quiet where your messages once appeared, the emotional warmth that once filled conversations. These small details suddenly become meaningful. The brain starts connecting pieces together. It realizes that something valuable might be slipping away, and when people feel they might lose something important, their behavior begins to change. This reaction is not always conscious. Most of the time it happens quietly inside the mind. Thoughts begin forming beneath the surface. Why did things change? Did I take her for granted? Is she moving forward without me? These questions create emotional tension, and emotional tension pulls attention back toward the person who stepped away. What once felt easy now feels uncertain, and uncertainty often creates interest. The mind becomes curious about what it may have misunderstood. It begins to reevaluate past behavior. Moments that once felt unimportant suddenly carry new meaning. This is how emotional awareness slowly begins to grow. When attention was constant, the connection required little effort. But once the balance changes, the brain starts realizing the value of what existed before. It begins to remember the patience you showed, the understanding you offered, the support that once felt normal. These memories begin to reshape how the mind views you. You are no longer simply a predictable presence. You become someone whose energy is no longer guaranteed, and that difference changes perception. Human psychology often attaches value to what feels limited. When something appears permanent, the brain relaxes. But when something feels uncertain, the mind begins protecting it. This is why stepping back can transform the emotional dynamic. It breaks the pattern of predictability. Instead of being the person who constantly tries to maintain the connection, you become someone whose presence now carries mystery. And mystery awakens interest. The mind becomes curious about what you are doing. It wonders about the life you are focusing on. It begins imagining possibilities that never existed when your attention was always available. This shift is powerful because it changes how emotional energy flows between two people. Before, the effort may have been one-sided. One person carried the emotional weight, the other simply received it. But when the giving stops, the balance begins to correct itself. The person who once felt comfortable now begins to feel the absence of that emotional support. And slowly, the mind begins to recognize the role you played in creating the connection. The warmth that once felt ordinary now feels meaningful, not because you demanded appreciation, but because distance allowed the truth to become visible. This realization can change how someone thinks about you. The person who once seemed predictable now appears strong. Someone who once seemed endlessly available now appears focused on their own life. This transformation creates respect, because confidence often grows in silence. When you stop trying to force attention, your energy becomes calmer. You begin protecting your peace instead of chasing validation. And people notice this shift. They sense the difference in your presence. You no longer move with the anxiety of needing approval. Your actions become quieter but stronger. You begin living your life without constantly seeking reassurance. This kind of energy feels different. It carries a quiet sense of self-worth, and self-worth naturally attracts attention, not through pressure, not through constant effort, but through the calm strength of someone who understands their own value. The moment you stop trying to prove your importance to someone, your presence begins to speak for itself. This quiet strength begins changing something even more important. It starts transforming the way you see yourself. For a long time, your focus may have been directed outward. Your thoughts circled around one question: how do I make this person care? Many people fall into this pattern without realizing it. They measure their value through someone else's reactions. When the other person responds warmly, they feel secure. When that response becomes distant, doubt slowly appears. That emotional dependence can quietly drain confidence. But when you finally release the need to control someone's feelings, a different kind of awareness begins to grow. Instead of watching every small change in their behavior, you start paying attention to your own life again. Your energy shifts. Your mind becomes quieter. You begin investing time in things that actually move your life forward. Your work becomes more focused. Your routines become healthier. Your days begin filling with activities that strengthen your own sense of direction. This transformation is subtle at first, but over time, it creates something powerful: independence. Emotional independence is one of the most attractive qualities a person can develop, not because it pushes others away, but because it removes the pressure that once surrounded every interaction. When someone no longer feels responsible for managing another person's happiness, conversations begin to feel lighter. The atmosphere changes. There is no longer an invisible weight hanging over every moment. People naturally relax around someone who carries their own stability. That calm energy communicates something important without using words. It shows that your happiness is not controlled by someone else's approval. It shows that your world continues moving forward regardless of who stays or leaves. This type of mindset creates respect. Human beings instinctively admire individuals who stand firmly in their own identity. Someone who understands their worth does not beg for recognition. They do not compete for attention. Their confidence grows from within rather than from external validation. And this inner balance becomes noticeable. When your life stops revolving around one person, your presence begins to change. You become less reactive. You stop analyzing every message or silence. Your thoughts become clearer because they are no longer trapped in emotional confusion. Clarity creates strength, and strength quietly reshapes the dynamic between two people. The individual who once felt no urgency suddenly begins noticing the difference. The emotional landscape they were familiar with has shifted. Your energy no longer feels the same. There is a new sense of distance, but it is not cold or hostile. It simply feels self-assured. That self-assurance can be surprising to someone who once expected constant reassurance. They may begin paying closer attention to how you carry yourself. The conversations that do happen feel different. There is no longer an attempt to impress or persuade. Instead, there is calm presence. This calmness can be deeply intriguing. When someone sees that you are comfortable without chasing their validation, it challenges the assumptions they once held. The image they formed about you begins to change. Instead of someone constantly seeking closeness, they start seeing a person who values their own peace. This realization can alter how they approach the connection. Interest often grows when people encounter someone who appears emotionally grounded. It signals maturity. It signals stability. It signals that your life has its own direction and meaning. That kind of energy naturally draws curiosity. But the most important change does not happen in their mind. It happens in yours. For the first time in a long while, you begin experiencing a deeper level of freedom. Your happiness is no longer tied to waiting for someone else's response. You begin enjoying your own journey again. Simple moments start feeling meaningful. You appreciate the quiet of a peaceful morning. You enjoy the focus that comes from working toward personal goals. You rediscover the joy of conversations that do not carry hidden expectations. Your emotional world becomes lighter. And this lightness allows you to grow in ways that were impossible when your attention was locked on trying to keep someone close. Growth brings clarity. You begin recognizing patterns that once confused you. You understand that relationships thrive through balance rather than pressure. When effort flows naturally from both sides, connection feels easy. But when one person carries the entire emotional weight, exhaustion eventually appears. This awareness protects your future. Instead of repeating the same cycle, you begin choosing connections that respect your energy. You become more selective about where your attention goes. Your time becomes valuable because you understand its importance. And people sense that change. When someone realizes that your attention is no longer guaranteed, they begin viewing it differently. Your presence becomes something meaningful rather than something automatic. This shift often causes people to reflect on their own behavior. They start questioning the role they played in the distance that formed. Sometimes they begin making small efforts to reconnect. Other times they simply observe quietly from afar. But the true power of this transformation is not about whether they return. It is about the person you become through the process. Someone stronger, someone calmer, someone who no longer feels the need to chase what should naturally choose them. This level of self-respect changes every future relationship you will experience. It becomes a silent standard guiding the way you interact with others. Because once you understand your own value, you stop negotiating it. You stop shrinking yourself to maintain someone's interest. You stop sacrificing your peace just to keep a connection alive. And when you live with that kind of awareness, your presence carries a quiet authority. People recognize it immediately, not through loud words or dramatic actions. Real transformation begins when a person finally understands one powerful truth. Chasing affection rarely creates genuine connection. When someone spends too much time trying to secure attention, they slowly forget something important about themselves. They forget that their presence already carries value. Many individuals spend years believing that love must be earned through constant effort. They try to become more available, more patient, more understanding, hoping their dedication will eventually be appreciated. But the deeper reality is different. True attraction grows when two people meet as equals, not when one person constantly tries to prove their importance. When someone finally releases that exhausting cycle, something remarkable happens inside their mind. Their focus moves away from pleasing others and returns to personal growth. Life begins expanding again. Interests that once felt distant begin returning. Goals that were ignored suddenly become meaningful again. This shift creates a different emotional atmosphere around them. Instead of seeking approval, they begin creating a life that feels fulfilling on its own. Their conversations become lighter. Their thoughts become clearer. Their energy becomes more centered. And this kind of presence changes how others respond. Human beings are naturally drawn toward people who appear grounded in their own direction. A person who moves through life with purpose carries a quiet magnetism. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not demand attention. But it naturally attracts curiosity. When someone sees that you are building a life that does not revolve around their validation, it forces them to reconsider their previous assumptions. The role they once played in your emotional world no longer feels the same. Your presence begins to feel rare. Scarcity has a unique effect on the human mind. When something is easily accessible, the brain places less emotional weight on it. But when something becomes limited, perception changes quickly. The mind begins recognizing importance where it once saw routine. This psychological response has shaped human behavior for centuries. People often realize the significance of something only after they feel its absence. This does not mean someone suddenly develops feelings out of nowhere, but it does mean awareness begins to grow. They may start reflecting on moments that once felt ordinary. They may remember conversations, laughter, or small gestures that once seemed unremarkable. Distance allows reflection. Reflection allows understanding. Sometimes this process leads to renewed interest. Other times it simply teaches them a lesson about appreciation. But either way, the shift reveals something meaningful about human nature. People learn the value of energy when it is no longer constantly available. This realization is important because it protects you from repeating unhealthy patterns. Once you experience the power of emotional balance, you begin approaching relationships differently. You stop rushing into connections that require you to overextend yourself. You stop giving unlimited effort to people who offer very little in return. Your boundaries become clearer. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep others away. They are guidelines that protect your peace and dignity. When someone respects those limits, trust grows naturally. When someone ignores them, distance becomes necessary. Understanding this difference creates healthier connections. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to maintain every relationship, you begin investing your energy where it is appreciated. You start recognizing who truly values your presence and who simply enjoyed the comfort of your availability. This awareness gives you freedom. Freedom to choose wisely. Freedom to walk away from situations that drain your spirit. Freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than emotional pressure. And when you live with that kind of clarity, your life becomes simpler. You no longer feel the need to analyze every small detail. Your thoughts become calmer because your actions align with your self-respect. Calmness creates stability. Stability creates confidence, and confidence changes how the world responds to you. People naturally gravitate toward individuals who carry themselves with quiet certainty. It signals maturity. It shows that you understand your worth without needing constant reminders from others. This presence transforms how connections develop in the future. Instead of attracting situations built on imbalance, you begin forming relationships that feel supportive and equal. Communication becomes easier. Effort flows both ways. Emotional safety grows naturally. This is the kind of connection most people desire but rarely understand how to create. It does not come from chasing someone's attention. It grows from living a life that reflects self-respect and emotional independence. When you build your world around purpose and personal growth, relationships become additions to your life rather than the center of it. And this perspective changes everything, because the moment you stop trying to convince someone to appreciate you, you open the door for people who already recognize your value. Those individuals do not need persuasion. They see your strength immediately. They respect your boundaries. They understand that genuine connection cannot exist without mutual effort. This is where real relationships begin, not through pressure, not through endless pursuit, but through two people meeting with equal awareness of their own worth. And once you reach this level of understanding, you realize something powerful. Walking away from imbalance was never a loss.